Once again, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Exchange Podcast. We are here to address issues around us as comrades. And today in studio, I have guests with me, and we are tackling the issue of the new funding model. Will it work? Is it or is it not for the comrades? Or maybe there are other comrades we do not know. Let my guests introduce themselves, and then we will commence. Karibuni sana.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Michael Kisao Shida, an LLB finalist from Kenyan University and a student leader representing the School of Law. Thank you for having me here.
Okay, you're welcome.
In the wisdom of the comrades, a breakup should never find you single. My name is Gishangi Gitonga, and I am the JCOT Secretary General. I am a man who listens to my people and sometimes speaks for them because I am a part of my people. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, karibuni sana. The elephant in the room, having mentioned earlier, is the new funding model and the reason why we need to change it. And it raises a number of questions. So we will begin by what's your take? What do we understand by the new funding model? What does it change? It raises questions, especially what was the previous funding model? And did we even need to change it? Yes, Michael, what do you think?
So, the previous funding model was a capitation form of funding where the university allocates a wholesome amount of money to all the students who are active. Then there's a significant reduction that is more equitable, such that all students enrolled in that university for all the programs would have to pay a similar amount. I remember it was 15,950, but roughly 16,000 for all the programs, whether you are in engineering, whether you are in medicine, whether you are in law. Now, for the new funding model, it is a model where it funds individual students. It funds you as winner, not as Kenyatta University. And in that funding, we will have to categorize you according to how needy you are, then fund you as an individual. In that, the government will pay 100,000 for winner, 100,000 for Michael, 100,000 for the other student. That way, instead of paying a capitation cost to the university, then letting the university allow everyone pay a similar amount. So that's the main difference.
Sure. So it narrows down to an individual perspective. So
Yeah, sure.
Gishangi, could you tell us probably what's your take on how do you view it, the new model?
The new funding model is a blessing and a curse. A blessing in that the DUC, the differentiated unit costing, which is the one that was previously used, was really there for the students. It was something that helped the comrades. But the downside to it is that it was unsustainable. Every comrade had 80% of their fee promised to be paid by the government. And of course, we know that our government is one of promises, and they are very good at that. But unfortunately, the highest amount that has ever been remitted to campuses is 67%. And it has actually gotten to points that out of the 80% that was promised, only 30% was disbursed. And so the new funding model is something that actually the university management boards really appreciate, for the simple reason that it is there to save the universities. But unfortunately, in as much as we want to save our campuses from getting closed down, we are forgetting that these campuses have people who learn in them. And the new funding model is a blessing in that it will save the campuses, but a curse in that there will be no people to study in those campuses.
Sure, so it's technically a dangerous sweet food. Now tukuje hapa sasa, shida iko wapi? When I had the president speak at the town hall, you were there, very vicious and very clear for the very purpose of being the voice of your people. And the president said that we spend 29% of our budget on education because it is very critical. Taking that statistics into practical application, that would be probably $1 trillion of the Kenyan expenditure driving into education. Again, he said that the new funding model will see a change from 45 billion to 82 billion, I believe. So how practical is that? I understand that you've mentioned it's all about promises, but is there a reason to refuse to enter into a deal that is that promising? And again, I am looking at the new funding model in that if it is that individualistic, we have comrades from much better backgrounds. Yani kuna comrade hata watoto wa waheshimiwa tutawaita comrades, kuna watoto wa mama mboga tamuita comrade. Unajua inabidi hapo sasa, if the government will do it individually, it will be better, because there is no reason for the government to spend money on you and you can get the same education. And we could probably use the money to bring equity and to make Kenya a more equitable place, because that has been the conversation for the longest. Yeah, so what do you think, Michael?
Okay, firstly, on the increment, on the allocation for education, I'm so sure that that covers also the money that is disbursed for bursaries, which is a total waste. Having all constitutional offices endowed with very huge funds for bursaries, which they are actually counterproductive. Then it also considers the amount that is channeled to HELB. So that's a loan. That's some money that the government anticipates to recover. Now, saying that that allocation has been increased, when you look at the funding model, there's an increment on the amount that one is supposed to get as loan. Because let's say one is categorized in the first band, and the government pays 70% as scholarship fee. Then we have a slot for the tuition fee, which is a loan. Then we have another slot for upkeep, which is also part of the loan. So you'll realize the upkeep plus the tuition fee that is loaned from HELB has been increased on an individual basis, which now makes a comrade graduate with a very big debt, as opposed to the previous model, where I was supposed to pay 16,000. So a loan of 30,000 will be enough for me for 2 semesters, because that will be apparently 15,000 for the first semester and 15,000 for the other semester. But now that's not the case, because even the lowest, for those who are vulnerable, they get 60,000 for upkeep and 60,000 as tuition fee. That's a loan of 120 in a year. So that amount, yes, it's there. It's disguised as a bigger allocation, but also it's money that the government seeks to recover. So we can't generally appreciate that fact that the allocation has been increased. So yeah, we must interrogate and look at how they are allocating it and how we are going to really be the beneficiaries of that increment.
Okay, Gishangi, I understand that you're well conversant with this one. I thought it was a directive from the government that you let the comrades enroll in school without anything. But then it was mentioned by the PS of Education that they will not sit for examinations until they have cleared. And that brings the flop in this new funding model. Who do you think is to blame? We have a lot of facts that do not seem to merge, because the government is saying this and then the ministry tries to say this. It's like we are having the same body with 2 heads. What do you think?
I think that the fish is rotting from the head. That yesterday at JQuat we had a town hall with the Citizen Television, with the panelists, and my people, once we had finished the discussion, my people told me that they were disappointed in the PS in Yangala, because for one, she seems to have very little knowledge of what she was saying, and a lot of clashing in their numbers. Geoffrey Monari tells us this, the PS says that those numbers have not been released, and it just draws us back to the point that my people usually emphasize, that we have a president who advises his advisors, that the president is the only one who knows what the new funding model is. And it's very unfortunate that I've attended a lot of forums and I've listened to the various stakeholders in the Ministry of Education, and I can assure you, no one has explained the new funding model better than the president. It's the same issue as the finance bill. The president is the only one who knew what the finance bill entails, and he was the only one who could communicate it. So I believe that the issue, or the one to blame, unfortunately, is the head of the nation, because he's the one who should have entrusted some people with some of these things, because having a PS who does not know what she's explaining and who can even get emotional in front of a camera to the point of answering some people rudely makes us wonder what kind of a nation we are in. So the fish only rots from the head. And so I believe that the problem is starting at the top.
So before I get to you, I remember Dr. Nyangala said that she would get back to the comrades. I don't know how. When the numbers were out, I kind of get some incompetence in this. And who do you think we should blame for all this mess?
The PS herself is to blame, because you cannot come to an interview without numbers. In JKUAT, I don't know about most of the other campuses, and probably I'm too patriotic, but you see, in JKUAT, we deal a lot with numbers. There is no cause that you'll do without numbers. So you cannot come to give us contradicting figures, or worse, to tell us that you do not know. And you're the PS, you're the senior most person at that point, because the CSS do not seem to have started working. And the PS herself is to blame for not having figures. I do not know what they expected when they were coming to JKUAT, but not having numbers, it showed, as you have said, a lot of incompetence. You cannot just come and tell us that you do not have figures. Well, we can clearly see that there are comrades who are suffering. They wanted at least to see that they have people who can represent them, that they have somebody at the top who knows what they are doing. But unfortunately, that is not the case. So the PS is to blame, but also the head of state really has to up his game, because having some of these people in some of these dockets, somebody who cannot explain something well, and they are the ones who are tasked to do it, is very unfortunate for any state. So the PS should up her game. She should know that we are not children, that we cannot be lied to every time, that was not a political rally, that that in these town halls people are very smart. And so once you come to us, come with figures, come with the real figures, come with things that can be believed, come with what you have done up to a certain point. So the PS and the head of state himself should up their game.
Now, Sir Michael, it begs the question that leads me to ask. As comrades, we look at it as the funding model. But as student leaders, or probably the general public, looking at it from a third eye, you see something. We see student leadership is there. We see probably other stakeholders, probably the push from management and university stakeholders. It brings about a lot. I think some is it a time bomb? Is it a bombshell? Is there something that they are not telling us about this funding model? It sounds sweet until the comrades don't want it, or is it just that when the deal is too good, the comrades are just thinking twice?
Well, the quick thought that comes into my mind, that is a wolf that is dolled up in a sheepskin, because you look at the model, you expect goodies. Then when the categorization is out, most of them were placed in band 5. And very few were placed in band 1, where they pay 5%. Then the rest were, most of them are in band 5, where they pay over 30%. So that's a scheme that is there to just show that we are trying to be equitable, but in the real sense. Now, why do you place me in band 5, then come up again with a forum where I can petition my categorization? What for? Why shouldn't we just be thorough? So coming to the analysis of a third eye, and maybe throw in my legal mind, or apply my legal mind to that, I would fault the whole system, because that's product of a failed system, in the sense that procedurally that model is at fault, in the sense that from its conceptualization there was no public participation. It was prematurely executed. Then we were now forced to take it in. And when there was the outcry, now there's a political expedition to make sure that they woo the public and the comrades post its implementation. Now there is numerous town halls. There's a very desperate ambition by the president to make sure that people understand and buy into the idea. You've seen all the political tantrums that we've been seeing, and that will tell you that we didn't come in at the appropriate point for public participation. We came in to be informed, to be briefed, to be convinced after it has already been prematurely implemented. I'll give you a very basic example. It was implemented in the first academic year, that is 2023-2024. Then the government was not ready because those guys were not classified promptly, and that led to, there was a directive from the ministry that all students should enroll without the fee payment. Then towards close to the first semester exams, there was also another directive that universities should allow students do the exams without even paying the fees, clearing the fees, that is. The second semester, that still happened. Now, this academic year, 2024-2025, they've tried to raise their socks a bit, that in that there's kind of prompt categorization where at least students know which band they fall in, they can appeal on time. But for the first year of its implementation, it was a total mess because students would reach out, parents would reach out. You really can't advise them on how much they should pay as their household contribution. So for me, I would see it as a product of a failed system in the sense that it was procedurally faulted. Then substantially, looking at the implementation of it, well, it might be a good idea because also, you see, in capitation, the university receives a funding maybe for 1,000 comrades, but you might realize that only, let's say, 500 or 700 students are active. Some have deferred, some were expelled from school, some have been suspended, but still, when the capitation amount is given from the government, it comes as a wholesome. So there was that part of discrepancy. But now, its implementation of this new funding model is where the problem is. Where did we come in as the public? Why didn't we come in at the conceptualization? Why are we coming in now to be convinced, to be briefed, to be just informed, to be wooed in supporting it? Because to me, that's how it appears. The government is desperate and it wants people to buy their idea. That's why very incompetent people are sent to woo the public, and it turns out badly.
Okay, sure enough. And now I will turn on. I think it being bigger than any of us, or rather all of us, it is our clarion call that we have to change it. All this is coming at such a time that we are also having issues with Kupet and Nat. It's almost like it's predictable what's going on. And I will quote a senator at the town hall in JKUAT, saying that there's someone probably beyond our borders who wishes that is masquerading within our education systems to make sure that we do not get independence as it should be. Gishangi, what do you think?
For one, I did not agree with much of the senator's remarks. Unfortunately, what he majorly did was whipping up people's emotions. As a financial engineer, I did not agree with a lot of his figures, but what I did agree with is the few things that he said about the incompetence of the Ministry of Education. We had a student leaders forum at the Kenya School of Government around 3-4 weeks ago, and we marched out of it for the simple reason that since it's planning, the it was supposed to be part of the planning committee, but the Ministry of Education felt that they were enough to do it, to plan a meeting of student leaders as the ministry and not involve the student leaders in the planning. And about the person or the invisible force that wants to sabotage our education, I might not comment much on it, but something I can comment about the new funding model is that I am not against the new funding model in itself. I am against the poor implementation, the total flop in it, because the new funding model has a good rationale behind it in itself. But for one, the people who are communicating it do not even know what it is. The people who are supposed to implement it are just as confused as we are, and they end up confusing us more. So the new funding model is something that should first be slowed down. Over the strikes of the teachers and all these others, I heard that the nurses and doctors will be striking soon. I believe that we are at a point as a country where we should be a bit more careful. We should tread more lightly, because it is not possible to have all sectors of the economy, all major sectors of the economy, fighting the government at the same time. I believe that the government should first retreat and try to check where they are going wrong, because it's not possible that we are all just there to see the government fail. We are in Kenya, we are Kenyans, and part of the demands that we had as the Gen Z was to ensure that the government does its work. And unfortunately, sometimes it does its work, but it never communicates. While sometimes we just get to hear of corruption scandals and such kinds of stuff. So we do have a lot in our country, and some of these problems are just inherent. There are things that we have been suffering since independence. For the force that is trying to sabotage our education, I will not comment much on that. But over the issue of the government upping its game, I am fully behind that.
Okay, you told the president at the town hall, very outrightly, on behalf of JQuat, that corruption is government's greatest expenditure. But before we come to that, we are looking on the way forward. What is the way forward? As comrades, how do we prompt the change? How do we revolutionize the system? How do we cleanse our country of all the menace that is going on? Kindly share with us. We had a scenario on the 2 of this month. Comrades at the University of Nairobi gave us a little show, and comrades across the country are promising a greater march at 9, I believe. What do you think? Is that the possible solution? Is that the only way?
Okay, just before I respond to that, I would want to comment on about the external forces. Looking at public finance as a subject, we have the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, which are the main sources of they're the main international financiers to developing countries and the middle income countries. Now, looking at how public finance works, we have, when countries about to go into, maybe to run bankrupt, if you were to compare it with an individual person, IMF has a program called the Structural Adjustment Program, that countries that are about to run insolvent, they are admitted to that Structural Adjustment Program. Now, we might not be aware, but that might be the external force. Because when you are admitted to the Structural Adjustment Program, now it comes with it some austerity measures. Especially, it attacks the fiscal planning. Tax more, cut on expenditure, then raise more money to repay the debt. Because they're trying to look as a financier, or as a financier, it's looking at how best it's going to recover its loans from these countries. Now, I'll give a very basic example with Kenyan University. We had 18 schools. Then there came the austerity measures. Public universities now were forced to merge these schools. So we were forced to merge the schools into 8 schools, so that to cut costs on the administrative costs to run the university. So when you look closely, you'll see that there are austerity measures that clearly, when you compare countries like Argentina that were previously admitted to the Structural Adjustment Program, you'll realize that these austerity measures resemble those that are given by IMF. So clearly, we can see that is the fact that the government doesn't want to admit that there is a force by such financiers. So I just wanted to comment on that. About students picketing, demonstrating, that's a constitutional right. We can't really dictate when and how they should do it. Yeah. So on that, I'm not so sure whether that will mean anything to the government, considering how desperate they are. But maybe we should first look at the policies, because nothing works without a law. What is this law that is empowering all that to happen? Let us get to it. Let us first amend that. Let us first change that. Then we follow it procedurally, because demonstrations will just engage with the police. Yeah, most likely. We won't even get an opportunity to be addressed by the PS or the CS. Yeah, yeah. So it might not be as productive as we might think it may be. Yeah. So we should really, as stakeholders, as student leaders, as university management, as university staff, um, we should engage the government, and mostly in the policies that they are hinging on, or they are hinging their changes on. Then let us first change that. Then we are now empowered legally to request for those changes, because as at now, this thing is already operational. It's being implemented. We're just trying to be cuffed into that whole thing.
I mean, I'm not being radical, but I feel that change is here, and we should embrace it as it is, because comrades are a very effective tool of social change, and they have been seen time and time again throughout history as a very critical tool. And may the will of the comrades be done. Geshangi, give us a closing remark.
In closing, I believe that the government should not act when things go wrong. That they should not be reacting to circumstances. If there's anything they should have learned from the Gen Z protests, is that as youth, if we decide that something will be done, it will be done. And my advice to the government is that they should relent, they should retreat, they should not scrap off the new funding model, but they should first take a step back and ensure that next year the students will be admitted under the DUC, and the students who are suffering under debt currently should first, who are suffering unjustly under the new funding model, that their cases should be solved first before they make us go the finance bill way. The government should just avoid, because we are not too happy demonstrating every time.
Sure.
We know that the economy also suffers when we go to the streets. It's not our will as comrades to always be demonstrating, but if need be, which unfortunately exists right now, and it's we really hope, and it's something I've told the Ministry of Education, it's something I've told my people, and it's something my people tell me. If there's a way that we could avoid demonstrations, we could, but the government is leaving us no options. So anyone from the government listening, just ensure that you do what is right. Ensure that when we tell you something is wrong, do not see us as children, because you learn the hard way. And so finally, thank you for the opportunity. I do not take it for granted, and thank you.
Yeah, very wise words, that aggression is a necessity to the comrades in retaliation from oppression. That has been it, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Exchange Podcast. I've been your host, Kimathi Wina. We've had a very interactive session on the new funding model, and we've had Gishangi Getonga, Secretary General JK UAT, and of course Michael Kitao from the Kenyatta University Law Campus. That's it. Until next time, I hope to see you. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Exchange Podcast. Leave your comments and like. Thank you.